Mr. Mayor, we're ready to go.
This is great. Great to see everybody on this Zoom platform. Y'all look fantastic. And except for there's Councillor Harris. I was just going to say I couldn't see Councillor Harris with the Our Heroes t-shirt behind him. I just want to start by saying welcome to Deputy Mayor Dodge. She's starting her term here as the Deputy Mayor for the next 4 months. And so she'll be reading in the minutes for this meeting's agenda. And I also just want to thank former Deputy Mayor now, Councillor Sorrento, for all of his work over the last 4 months. So great to see everybody out here. And good afternoon and welcome to regular meeting of Council and General Committee for Wednesday, May 6th. May 6th. We begin this gathering by acknowledging the land in which we gather is the traditional territory of Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. So before I begin the Mayor's report, and members of Council and staff would have received the notice from the CAO today, I'd like to begin the meeting with a moment of silence to remember one of our own staff members, Vincenzo Cialetti. Vincenzo was a longtime employee, starting with the city in 1981. He was a laborer in Municipal Works Department. And on behalf of the City of St. Catharines, our thoughts and prayers go out to Vince's family, friends, and co-workers. We are paying tribute to Vincenzo by lowering flags at city facilities across the city in his honor. So if I could just ask for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. And on behalf of Council, I'd like to read a statement regarding the offensive comments recently reported in the media related to St. Catharines Regional Councillor Laura Yip. This news was very upsetting, as we have all seen the dangers of hateful, misogynist language in our country, tearing families and communities apart over the last several weeks. Violent, hateful speech and misogyny have no place in our community. It certainly does not deserve a platform. We all have a responsibility to call it out and call it what it is. This kind of language and treatment is why women do not get involved in politics. And I can understand why. No one deserves to be subjected to violent, hateful speech, regardless of their political views. As someone who sits with Councillor Yip on Regional Councillor, I can say she is an outstanding councillor. She brings such a different perspective to the council discussions. And I can say that I stand with her as mayor of the city of St. Catharines, and I know that council stands with her against these kind of hateful comments that have been made recently. So I just wanted to state that publicly. Reminder to those who are following along that we are in a continued state of emergency due to COVID-19. You'll be hearing an update from our CAO in a few minutes. We are seeing positive numbers from public health. We're seeing that the curve is going in the right direction, which is down, but it doesn't mean that we can let up on our efforts. And so with the nicer weather coming, with Mother's Day around the corner, and with May long weekend only a few weeks away, please be mindful of physical distancing and continuing to make sure you're following the directions of proper hygiene, washing your hands after any kind of contact. When you go out, wash your hands. When you come back in, use hand sanitizer as much as possible. And also continue to follow the direction of public health, which is largely to stay home and stay safe. If you have to go out, you're going out for essential items only. If you're out on our trails, if you're traveling through our parks, try to keep that safe distance. But we are hearing from some of the medical experts when it comes to walking by people, the transmission rate is infinitely small. So it's a matter of just keep our distance on our trails. Let's keep our distance in our parks as we walk through, but make sure that we're all doing our part to push back at COVID-19. With Mother's Day this weekend, let's be creative on how we're reaching out to our moms. Let's make sure that we're reaching out to them in any way possible, but also protecting them in a way so that we're not transmitting this virus in our community and including our loved ones. The long weekend is coming up. You're hearing some directions coming from the province. You'll be hearing more from our CAO about the directions here in the city of St. Catharines. We want to make sure we reinforce the message about staying home and not being in places of congregation with folks. Our St. Catharines Fire Services is reminding residents not to set off fireworks. Sale of fireworks is also currently not permitted in the city. And we want to make sure that we're making sure our fire services are ready for when an emergency is required. And we'd like to reduce that by not having fireworks being let off across the city. In terms of the businesses, you'll be hearing from Brian York, our economic director, on some of the initiatives they're working on. But we can't just flip a switch and turn on the economy. We can't just flip a switch and make things go again. We're going to be moving towards a new normal, as you're going to hear about in the next little while. But we all got to make sure that we're following the directions as they come forward. It was good to see that the province has announced the opening of municipal construction sites, including the Canada Games Park and the Port Dalhousie Piers. You'll be starting to see activity in those construction projects moving forward. And there will be more information that the CAO is going to be sharing shortly. I'd also like to welcome Colleen Smith, who is the new Performing Arts Center Director, who started her role as Executive Director on Monday. We look forward to her leadership as she works towards bringing the Performing Arts Center back to life after COVID-19 and through its recovery. Also, May 4th through the 9th is Economic Development Week, and it's an opportunity to highlight the importance of economic development in our communities. And I got to say, we probably have one of the best economic development teams here in Ontario, located in St. Catharines. They have done an outstanding job during this COVID crisis. And I just want to say, if you look at some of the things they've been working on, the Pickup STC, working with businesses as they navigate their way through. And I just want to touch on an example. Seaway Fluid Power is a company that experienced a significant fire before COVID-19, about 3 or 4 weeks before COVID-19. They've been a long-time business in St. Catharines. They had a substantive fire that pretty much closed their operations down. And Brian and his team were from the day one working with Seaway Fluid Power. They are now open on Bunting Road, and it was about six to 8 weeks to get them from the fire to opening up a new complex on Bunting Road. And our economic development team played a very important role in making that happen. So I just want to say, as part of Economic Development Week here in St. Catharines, that's the kind of work that the economic development team is doing. And I just want to say best of luck to Daryl and the rest of the team at Seaway Fluid Power as they continue to recover and do business. Just another example of the resiliency of the businesses in our community. Also on Friday, it's the 75th anniversary of VE Day, which marks the end of the Second World War. And so our museum is going to be providing some online content about our efforts during World War II and the end of VE Day, where our veterans came home. And we're also going to shine a light on the Lincoln and Welland Regiment, since they played such an important role throughout World War II, and also freeing such communities as Bergen op Zoom and Eeklo in the Netherlands. So if you, as members of council, if you can reach out to people on your social media channels and make sure that we're remembering those who paid the ultimate sacrifice during World War II. Also, the skies of St. Catharines will be blue tonight. The beam of hope is being highlighted here in St. Catharines. There will be a bright blue beam between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock tonight. The Niagara 2021 Games is going across communities in Niagara and shining that blue light in support of our frontline workers, in support of the healthcare workers, the essential workers in our community. And it's also a light of hope and unity for all of our communities here in Niagara. I also want to acknowledge the thank you banner that flies here at City Hall. The thank you banner is outside. It's hanging from the top of the City of St. Catharines City Hall, and it expresses our gratitude to all the frontline workers, including our city staff, who have made sure that the essential services that our residents have required are there being provided day in and day out. And that banner will be up there a long time, and it'll be a reminder to our community of all of the efforts of so many people, including our staff that are here on this Zoom platform today. Tomorrow from 1 to 3 p.m., there's going to be a food giveaway, a grocery food giveaway at the Market Square at City St. Catharines City Hall. So there will be a truck of groceries that are being delivered by Glen Gord Land Development. And I want to acknowledge Councillor Cisco has been coordinating it. So it takes place from 1 to 3 tomorrow. And it's going to be, if you know people in need for food, this will be an opportunity for them. And so I'm going to pretty much end it there. I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to jump on here today. And I want to thank the councillors for putting the time in to review the agenda. And with that, I'm going to look to the clerk to adopt the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda through to the clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the following items of additional correspondence have been placed in Council's Sugar Sync folder. NPCA board meeting highlights from April 16th, AMO watch file, April 30th, Niagara Region COVID-19 Government Relations Strategy Report, CL6 2020, and the following amendment was made to the agenda. General Committee Item 2.3, Council Correspondence, to endorse the resolution from the above report, CL6 2020 from the region, rather than just receive it. And that's all the changes I have.
Okay, prior to approval of the agenda, can I have the Director of Economic Development speak to the regional correspondence that was just received?
Sure thing. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll speak to the point regarding the GR motion. We have a strong and successful history of working collaboratively with the region on the priorities that align with what our municipal needs are. So we're happy to coordinate and collaborate with the region on this effort.
Okay, thank you for that brief update.
You said brief.
All right, any changes to the agenda? So I can see I'm on a screen, different screen today, so I can see every councillor as well. So if you are putting up your hand, I should be able to make a note, but is there any changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I will look to Councillor Townsend. Just put up your hand. You're moving the agenda. Thank you. And Councillor Sorrento, you're seconding it. Put up your hand, Councillor Sorrento. Okay. All right, I got a note. Is there a note here? I'll look to the clerk.
Councillor Littleton, I believe, had her hand up.
Okay, Councillor Littleton.
Thank you. I was concerned. I wasn't sure if Director York was referencing the response from Niagara Region about the vacant rental unit. I have a conflict with that, so I'll mention it now in case it comes up again. Thank you.
Okay, he was for clarification, Councillor, the director was talking about the government relations report that was sent to city councils across the region for endorsement as a means to develop a Niagara-wide government relations strategy, just for clarification. Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Okay, I'll go to the clerk to call the question. All in favor? Actually, all in favor. It's hands up. Sorry. I got it. Thank you. Sorry, Bon. Sorry okay. To the clerk.
That's okay.
Okay, any conflicts of interest? Okay.
So I do.
Okay, Councillor Kushner.
Yes, I have a conflict of interest on the in-camera item, the purchase of land, which is adjacent to a property I'm involved with.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing Councillor Littleton.
So just to make sure, just to be clear, I have a conflict with 2.3, number 3, response from Niagara Region, St. Catharines City Council motion, optional tax on vacant residential units. I have conflict.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so that is the declarations of interest. Deputy Mayor Dodge, this is your first time in the minutes.
Oh.
So you're moving the minutes that
Yes.
that council adopt the minutes, the meeting of council held on Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020, and that council adopt the minutes of the general committee meeting held on Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020.
That's correct.
Thank you, Councillor
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Dodge. Councillor Phillips, you're seconding this?
Yes, so moved.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, seeing none. Carried. Okay. Now we move into resolve into general committee. Motion to move reports on consent. We have a motion that council approve the consent agenda, save and accept those items brought forward for discussion. And Councillor Phillips, I have you moving the consent agenda. Thank you. Look to the clerk to read the items. To the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this afternoon's consent agenda, item 2.1, Engineering Facilities and Environmental Services, 2019 summary report of the City of St. Catharines water distribution system as required under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and item 2.2, Legal and Clerk Services, Office of the City Clerk, amendments to simplified meeting procedures to permit electronic participation during an emergency. And just for council's clarification, it's for our advisory committees to begin. And 2.3, Legal and Clerk Services, Office of the City Clerk, Council Correspondence. Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes. Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried unanimously.
Hey, just a reminder to council is that this is being recorded as well. So we just want to make sure that if there's any discussion or dialogue going on, just make sure you're muted. In addition to anyone following in the public, what we essentially just did there was a summary of the St. Catharines water distribution system, which is required by the provincial government. It is an annual report that was approved by council, as well as a simplified meeting procedures that will allow for our committees to now go through electronic participation, exactly like we're doing here today. We have no public meetings pursuant to the Planning Act. There are no special presentations. We will now resolve into general committee. And this is where we go over to our CAO, Shelley Chemnitz, who will provide a detailed update of the city's operations around COVID-19. She will also be joined by Christine Douglas, Director of Financial Management Services, who will be providing an update as well. So I'll turn it over to the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through Mr. Mayor, today's discussion agenda includes the third update to council regarding city services and activities during the COVID-19 pandemic. As you've seen, the reports are fairly lengthy and contain quite a variety of information items. There's a lot of work and decision-making occurring both at the municipal level and at provincial and federal levels. Our efforts to keep council and the community informed are a combination of our corporate communications division with our website, social media and media releases, our mayor's staff daily updates to council in coordination with all our partners, and this report. While this report may feel like a catch-all of information, it's specifically designed to update council and the public on our work in addressing the 4 objectives of our municipal emergency control group. Throughout the pandemic, we've been guided by those 4 objectives, and as the pandemic evolved, so did the objectives. The first changes to those objectives are contained in today's report. Specifically, the first 2 objectives have been revised to recognize that we're beginning steps to move from the emergency response phase to the recovery phase. Our first objective was to remain committed to providing our community with essential services, and it has been amended to include focusing on recovery, specifically to focus on recovery while continuing to provide those essential services. The second objective has also had the recovery wording added to it. Some highlights from our report today. In our traditional sense of an emergency, it's usually fairly clear that the emergency situation has ended and recovery is now in progress. Of course, the planning for recovery begins long before the actual recovery, but nonetheless, it's usually fairly clear. For example, floodwaters recede or a windstorm has ended, fire is no longer burning. For this particular emergency, that clarity of beginning of recovery doesn't exist. In fact, given the economic challenges associated with this emergency, waiting for a definitively clear line isn't even a consideration. Recovery needs to begin with small steps informed by the medical community and evaluated regularly. Recovery will not be the same for everyone. Throughout this situation, we have balanced the needs of many various stakeholders, and this will continue during our next phase. In fact, the need for balance will become even more critical in the weeks and months ahead. We've included in the report a basic summary of the province's framework for reopening. Our recovery planning teams will use the guidelines within the framework to plan our activities. And as I mentioned last meeting, we have a team working on this. The recovery planning team consists of approximately 25 city employees across each department, led by directors Brian York and Phil Christie. The team has been making recovery plans for the past couple of weeks, dividing their main team into 3 subgroups of economic, organizational, and psychosocial. Although the city has to work within the orders and guidelines provided by the province, we're planning and preparing our business partners and facilities for recovery. Some of the considerations we will work through include providing information to local businesses regarding support for financial hardships, guiding them on information of best practices to provide their services safely, preparing our facilities for reopening, including installing barriers at all of our public-facing counters and possibly within work areas, looking at possible screening processes for staff and the public, limiting touch points and having access to only one entrance for all facilities, and installing extra hand sanitizing and washing stations, or also having markers on the floor to ensure social distancing. Just some of the things that we'll be looking at, whether they are useful and would be recommended for our facilities. Our next report to Council on May 20th will be heavily focused on recovery plans and updating some of our recovery measures that we have decided to that date. We're starting to hear the phrase, the new normal, quite often. In most cases, it's associated with considering and explaining that while the virus remains a threat and treatments and/or a vaccine are still in the future, physical distancing will remain critical and adjustments to our work arrangements will need to be made. It appears that there's a general understanding of this, that our life in work and community will change. In addition, I do want to highlight that staff are planning also to find positives in our new normal. We've shifted quite definitively to virtually working, virtually meeting, and virtually connecting. In all the change, we've realized positive aspects of virtual life. We're reflecting on these positives and hope to capitalize on them, developing a new hybrid normal of working, meeting, and connecting. Many of us have now experienced both extremes, and we should be using these experiences to design a new way forward. As mentioned in the recent announcements from the province has given us a more positive outlook on recovery. Some of those specific items are listed in the report. The mayor also mentioned the construction that on Friday, May 1st, the province amended the emergency orders to allow construction projects and services that support those operations to commence. What this means is we're proceeding with all types of our construction projects, including linear works, parks, and facilities. And the mayor also mentioned our Port Piers and the Canada Summer Games facility. Regarding our second objective of safety and security of the public and staff through recovery, there's a section of the report that addresses the activity and the enforcement of provincial orders. It contains a number of statistics regarding calls received, triaged, and investigated relating to the provincial orders. To date, our efforts have been at an educational focus. In all instances, staff have successfully obtained compliance and resolution through education without the need for issuing tickets. You will notice that the stats provide information from Citizens First, Economic Development, Planning Building Services, and Municipal Works. I can't help but use the word hybrid again. In this situation, many of our work groups are now seeing the 5-day week expand to 7 and hours expand each day. Some of our operations were already in that mode and more have changed to address these community needs. We've taken the all hands on deck approach, and thus our service provision spans across a number of departments, supplemented by the region's call center as well. Despite our division of work, the public-facing division is less. Basically, we need the public to understand those two options that are contained on our website to raise their complaints. At any time, an electronic complaint form is available on our website or contacting Citizens First at stcatharines.ca. By phone during our regular hours, it's our regular number of 905-688-5600. And on weekends and after 4:30, it is the regional dispatch line at 905-984-3690. I include those as I know our good weather is coming and we are anticipating having more calls. This past weekend did bring us some nice weather, though it seems to be leaving us again. And although there aren't many alarming complaints that were brought in, we did receive some complaints well after the fact that an incident occurred. And we just remind council and the public to use that contact information if they witness potential infractions at the point that they see them. To help enforce, starting this weekend, municipal works supervisors will be actively enforcing social distancing in parks and on trails. And shifts have been put in place to cover evenings and weekends until 9 p.m. The report also details efforts in our commitment to mental health in our community. The control group has remained cognizant of the stress and anxiety that COVID-19 may create for both staff and the community and made mental health and well-being a priority, taking conscious efforts to assist those that may be struggling at home and in the workplace. Our Employee and Family Assistance Program has been extended to all part-time employees, including those that were part of the workforce reduction. For the community, our CRCS department has identified services that can be delivered to the public online to ensure that citizens who depend on our services can continue to receive them through the pandemic. We're creating a virtual experience portal on the website to provide user-friendly one-stop location for virtual programs. Our museum staff have created a legacy of a pandemic program and are asking the community to contribute journals, photos, and memories to create an archive of how the community has experienced and viewed the pandemic. We continue to support our older adult center members with personal phone calls and the senior centers without wall programs. They continue to ask for frequent follow-up calls to help with their social isolation. There is an update also contained in the report regarding the needle pickup pilot project. This was approved by council during the 2020 budget process. Originally, the pilot included tracking the number of needles picked up, costs of cleaning up of outdoor spaces. Municipal work crews were to be augmented with additional city staff and paired with outreach workers from the region for 7-day coverage. The plan has been adjusted with the declared state of emergency. Municipal works will still be providing cleanup services and tracking. With staff reductions, crews will only be available from Monday to Friday. If there is an emergency, staff will be called in to address it. In recognition that social issues with our outdoor spaces remain, the city will be engaging directly with Gateway Residential and Community Support Services of Niagara and Niagara Resource Service for Youth, the RAFT, to provide outreach support to our staff when they require social service support. The agencies were successful under the Niagara Region Community Services RFP for assertive street outreach. Through direct engagement, city staff will be able to rely on 3 trained workers who can respond directly and immediately to a person's needs by bringing coordinated services from across the homeless serving system and encouraging and supporting clients to access shelter, housing, and other social supports. The cost of the revised project is $120,000 as compared to the original budget of $350,000. The services will aim to proactively engage with people sleeping rough to facilitate pathways into housing, provide standardized intake, triage, and assessment to assess persons' vulnerability, deliver case coordination in collaboration with government and nonprofit organizations to support those who may be reluctant to access traditional services. During the pandemic, the outreach workers will also ensure that clients are regularly assessed for signs and symptoms of COVID-19 and educated on pandemic safety and provided access to medical assessments as required and the self-isolation facility. It is the intention that utilizing the services of trained outreach workers will allow our municipal work staff to focus on parks and downtown maintenance while outreach provides the necessary support to the individuals in need within our community. So I'll now pass over the discussion to our Director of Financial Services, Christine Douglas, who has, we're going to show you, we're going to use a PowerPoint presentation for the first time. So if Evan, if you can tee that up for us.
Okay. All right. Thank you, CAO Chemnitz. With this being the fourth council meeting under COVID-19, the finance team has put together a presentation to summarize the financial impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. How do we, there, thanks. The financial analysis is based on a period up to June 30th, 2020. It is also based on the information available and is subject to change given the uncertainties of COVID-19. Staff are tracking updates regularly and adjusting the financial picture as new information becomes available. The previous financial impact report was presented to Council as part of the April 8th Council meeting in the COVID-19 City Staff Initiatives report. The financial impact at that time was estimated to be 2.4 million and was until the end of May 2020. Oops. Oh. Every time I click my mouse, it goes. Yep. Sorry.
It's like spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Giving away the ending.
Yep. Yeah, you can just put it back and then I'll. Yes, thanks, Evan. Okay, next slide. As discussed by CAO Chemnitz, COVID-19 has impacted a number of city non-essential services through the closure of our city facilities, resulting in the cancellation of our recreational programs and rentals, which include the Meridian Centre and the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. At its special council meeting of March 27th, council approved a number of items to assist property owners during the COVID-19 pandemic, which include waiving of penalty and interest on tax, water, and accounts receivable until June 30th, waiving NSF charges for any checks or pre-authorized payments returned, deferral of the April 30th tax installment to June 30th, deferral of the 2020 water and wastewater increase until July 1st, 2020, reducing parking enforcement to safety-related issues only, such as fire routes, accessible parking, no parking areas, fire hydrants until June 30th. Waiving payment for on-street parking or in municipal parking lots or in garages at this time, and no disconnection of water services for non-payment of water and wastewater billings until June 30th. Other services impact include the reduction of parks and horticultural maintenance activities, suspension of building inspections activities for non-essential facilities. However, with the updated provincial orders of Friday, May the 1st, the city will be moving forward with municipal infrastructure construction projects and all services that support these activities. For St. Catharines Transit Commission, the rear boarding of buses has impacted their ability to collect transit fares. Next slide, Evan. Looking at how the services in these service impacts have affected the city's 2020 tax levy budget. Foregone revenues are estimated to be 8 million, including transit, Meridian Centre, and the Performing Arts Centre. Additional expenditures incurred related to COVID-19 in an amount of 200,000. Mitigation measures and savings of 5.7 million are estimated to offset the foregone revenues. These measures include staff deferrals and reductions, expenditure reductions at transit, the First Performing Arts Center and Meridian Center due to facility closure. There are also utility savings and service reductions to the city parks operations. The net tax levy impact to June 30th is an unfavorable impact of 2.5 million expected. Next slide, Evan. Shown here graphically is the impact of the COVID-19 on the city's 2020 operating budget. Again, is estimated to be the $2.5 million until the end of June. Next slide. Looking at the city's water and wastewater budget impact, there are lost revenues and mitigation measures with this budget as well. To June 30th, we are forecasting a favorable impact on $100,000, mainly the result of service level reductions, which is within the water and wastewater service level reductions. Next slide, Evan. The city's parking budget is also being impacted by COVID-19 with an estimated unfavorable impact of $500,000 to June 30th, 2020. Next slide. Summarized here is the impact of the COVID-19 on the city's 2020 tax and rate budgets. The estimated impact at this time is an unfavorable impact of $2.9 million. Next slide. Due to the COVID-19 and the relief measures approved by Council on March the 27th, finance staff are more closely monitoring the city's cash flow. With the deferral of the April 30th second interim tax due date until June 30th, an impact on the city's cash flow was expected, although our residents continue to make their tax payments. As of today, the city has received approximately 60% of the April 30th interim tax levy. With our residents continuing to forward their tax and water payments to the city remains in a positive cash flow position, which is expected to remain until the end of the current forecast period of June 30th. Also at this time, we have seen only a small number of residents suspending their tax and water pre-authorized payments. There are few customers, and there are only very few customers who have actually canceled their pre-authorized payments. In addition, Regional Council at its April 23rd meeting agreed to accept proportionate payment of the lower tier tax, water and wastewater payments based on our collections. This also assists in keeping our cash position in the black. Should it be necessary, the city does have a $20 million line of credit available. Next slide, Evan. As we discussed earlier, summarized here again are some of the mitigation measures that have been implemented to reduce the impact of COVID-19 on the city's budgets. Next slide. Understanding that to June 30th, the impact on the city's tax and rate budgets is estimated to be 2.9 million. Staff is reviewing options to offset this shortfall with other options. Staff are not looking for recommendations from council at this time. Once we are on the other side of this pandemic and at the appropriate time, staff will return with a plan to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 for council's consideration. At this time, we want to assure council that we are reviewing and considering all options available. These options include the usage of the 2019 year-end surplus, usage of other appropriate reserves, such as the tax stabilization reserve, the building code reserve, and the civic project fund, reduction or elimination of the tax levy support for various capital projects. Next slide. As we continue to look forward into the other side of this pandemic, there will be some future challenges. For transit, there could be further revenue losses should Brock decide to go with online classes format for the fall term. Overall, the year-end position will be dependent on the length of restrictions and the recovery plan of both the province and the region and how these plans impact the city's services and operations. Staff will continue to monitor and update the financial impact, reflecting the phased service resumption based on the provincial and regional decisions based on loosening the restrictions. Next slide. Therefore, to conclude, there will continue to be disruptions to city services based on provincial orders and regulations and due to the declared state of emergency. We will continue to monitor and estimate the financial impact on city services and operations and bring regular updates to council as required. To June 30th, the estimated impact on the tax and rate budgets for 2020 is $2.9 million. Also, staff will continue to look ahead and to work with our regional and provincial partners to get to the other side of this pandemic, to manage the future challenges within our means. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes the update.
Thank you, Director Douglas, for that very thorough presentation. I'll look to the CAO. Is there any final remarks you'd like to make before I open the floor to council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, we're complete with the remarks we've made, and we can take questions.
Go, Councillor Sorrento.
Presentation. Just have a few questions, Mr. Mayor, and first one goes to, I believe it's Director Kate. I see that we had about 6,137 calls for Citizens First Director. I'm just wondering how this is impacting our bylaw enforcement officers. I know that they were very, very busy prior to the pandemic. Can you just give us an update as to how it's impacting the staff, and if they're just a little bit behind schedule, or which would be understandable? So if you could just comment on that, please, Director.
Thank you. Through the mayor to the councillor, the city's bylaw enforcement staff have been undergoing business as usual, except that we've had to put some safety protocols in place to protect their own safety. So at this time, they have not been entering occupied buildings unless there's an emergency situation. With the addition of enforcing the provincial emergency orders, we've put in place what has been referred to earlier as a hybrid process, where the calls that are coming in through Citizens First that are related to COVID provincial emergency orders, such as non-essential operations of businesses, as well as complaints about groups of people congregating in more than 5. For the calls that are coming in related to non-essential business operations, those have been triaged by our economic development department, who are then reaching out and engaging with those business owners to help them understand the provincial order and where they may or may not fit in within that framework, and helping them with advice and education on how to bring their service delivery online or curbside or through other methods. After the triage then comes down to bylaw enforcement, particularly around matters related to congregating in public areas. Those complaints have not been, we've had a significant amount of complaints, but they haven't been so much that they've rendered our bylaw staff completely burdened by them. That being said, we're also entering the summer months now. So as of May 1st, we are now enforcing the city's long grass and weeds bylaw, and every year that significantly raises our number of complaints. So that more so, I would say, would be contributing to the workload of bylaw enforcement staff, as well as dealing with some matters, particularly in the area around the university with students vacating their rentals and some property standards concerns around that. So to date, the COVID provincial emergency order enforcement has not been too problematic to enforce at this time.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Mayor, my question is for Director Smith. And given the recent weather, the good weather, can you just give us an update with regards to our park, Director Smith, please, our parks? If people want to walk through them and sorry, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the provincial orders are still in place with respect to these facilities with amenities being closed. However, we do support and allow walkthrough and people exercising in our parks as long as they're not congregating in groups of greater than 5. We at this point have no idea when that order will change, so we will continue to enforce it that way in the near future.
Great, thank you. Mr. Mayor, my question is for Director Christie. It's about the older persons programs and Without Walls. I know that the program has been extended throughout the month of May. Director Christie, will you see this being extended throughout the month of June?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we will run the program for as long as we are able to. So yeah, for however long we need to be running that program, and perhaps even beyond. It could be a new way of doing business for us as well. So
Okay, that's great. And Mr. Mayor, with your permission, I will be sending council an update with regard to the downtown business BIA. So you can expect an update from me this afternoon, something from Executive Director Tisha Polacco. Thank you. No further.
Now, thank you, Councillor Sorrento. I have Councillor Townsend next, then Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to staff for doing all the work you've been doing. I just have a question. I continue to get emails and calls from the new cosmopolitan development in my ward. I know staff have looked after getting the electricity back on for the street lights. There's been numerous complaints about not having a street sign up. I know there are a few people watching this council meeting right now. Just wondering if someone can provide an update as to some of the complaints that have continuously been forwarded by the residents that have just moved into that area.
Okay, who wants to take who's going to answer that one? Daryl?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've been working, Municipal Works has been working with EFES and PBS and trying to address these issues. We have, PBS has reached out specifically to the developer to remind them of the obligations that they have under the development agreement and are working to get those enforced as quickly as we can. Understanding that it's hard at this particular moment. When this incident first was raised, the restrictions were far more restrictive than they are right at the moment. So we are working through those things with the developer, and they are having to conform to those provincial orders. So it's taking a little more time than we would normally have hoped it would.
Councillor Townsend?
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Mayor, there's no timeline where they can get a street sign up. The challenge here is that it's not necessarily like some of the other things. It's a lot of the complaints are saying that delivery drivers cannot find the street, and during a time like this, a lot of the residents need to, some of them are seniors who are reliant on deliveries to their house. So I'm wondering, just for those watching who live in that area right now, will there be a sign put up in the near future?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if the developer cannot proceed with putting up the sign, then I will get a temporary sign put up through our forces.
Okay, thank you, Daryl, for that. I appreciate that. I do have one more question. I've had a number of emails from residents, not just in my ward, but outside, regarding the cul-de-sacs and being cut. I'm not talking about the small circles. I'm just talking about some of the larger areas where some senior citizens might live. And I've had a few seniors reach out to me asking if the city will continue to maintain some of those larger cul-de-sacs in their neighborhoods.
Okay, so that I'll take that one. That answer will be made next meeting, May 20th. So there will be no discussion on that matter today, as it's not on the agenda, but it is scheduled to be on the agenda for May 20th. I know a number of councillors would have gotten information on that, but that'll be for the next meeting. Thank you, Councillor Townsend.
Awesome. That works. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councillor Littleton, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to perhaps Director Christie. I know my colleague asked about the parks and that, but on page 3 it says that one of the plans would be to open some outdoor spaces like parks. But what does that look like? Are we talking playground equipment first, baseball, soccer? What are we looking at?
Through you, Ms. Mayor, we're not prepared yet to open up our playgrounds and any of those spaces at the moment. It's just perhaps lifting some of the restrictions in terms of the use of those open areas, but not specifically the amenities where there is a larger potential for gathering of larger groups.
So opening up larger areas for throwing a ball or actually playing baseball?
Through you, Ms. Mayor. So we can allow, for example, we have folks who are going through the parks now and kicking a ball through a soccer net. As long as there isn't, as Director Smith earlier described, a large gathering of more than 5 people, those types of activities are okay. But not the the full-on baseball game that's happening and where people can be in close proximity of each other. So moderate groups, moderate size groups, and those types of gatherings.
And that is specifically for the end of June 30th right now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, so specifically referencing the provincial order as best described as stage 1. So up to June 30th, yes.
Okay, so potentially stage 2 could begin after the July long weekend.
Hard to say, through you, Mr. Mayor, hard to say, but we are hopeful.
Okay, thank you. I know this is it's really hard. It's really hard for people not to be able to exercise and have all these seasons that are coming up, that's kind of all in limbo. So thank you for that. I did also want to ask, perhaps this is to the CAO, the needle pickup pilot project. It seemed, and this is no criticism in the delivery or the report, but it seems a little vague. And I'm just wondering, do we have details? Is there a number that folks can call in about and say, I've noticed there's a large, number of needles here. Is there these 3 people, they have their own, circuits that they are going to be walking, and, just can I have a little bit of details on that, please?
Certainly, I will defer to the Deputy CAO as he's leading this project for us.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The program that we've talked about and the reference to the outreach workers is specific to dealing with individuals that they come across in parks or throughout the downtown. The needle pickup program itself will continue on city properties to be managed through municipal work staff. And those calls can come through Citizens First as they normally would, and we would continue to do so. What we're referencing in the change of the program is we don't have the same number of staff in our parks or in the downtown as a result of the COVID-19. So the response time may not be as it was in when we're in normal operations and we have more staff throughout all of the parks. However, we are and will continue to be committed to dealing with needles on city properties through calling Citizens First.
I'm sorry, I think I must be missing something. I thought this was a new program to try and do more, to really try to provide a network for folks. For example, in our ward, there's, Centennial Gardens and Gale Crescent, and we have, areas that some folks need some assistance in. And I just thought that this program would be a little bit more, I'm sorry, I'm struggling with the words. I hate Zoom. It would be a little bit more proactive, perhaps is the word. I'm just hearing like it's going to be phone into Citizens First, kind of like last year, and there's a bit of a delay because of COVID. Is that accurate?
So thank you. Just to clarify through you, Mr. Mayor, what I was referencing was specific to the needle pickup. What is new is the engagement with the outreach workers. So we will have 3 dedicated outreach workers, 2 that are employed by Gateway, 1 that is employed by the Raft, who will be dealing specifically with different areas throughout the city. So just to give you an example, the schedule that they're looking at right now is having 1 worker start from 7 and have a shift 7 to 3. and they'll be going out and doing a circuit throughout the city and some of our high traffic areas to deal with the individuals. There's another shift that would be, I believe it's from 3 o'clock until 11 or 9. I don't have the specific number, but they'll be doing the same thing. So there will be a constant outreach support worker that's going in and around. If we come across, or somebody has stumbled across a group of individuals or an individual needing support, if they were to call Citizens First, we would be able to relay that message directly to the outreach worker, who could then go and deal with the situation. So that's what I was, that's the new part of the pilot program. The piece that we aren't able to do as much as we wanted to was on the specific needle pickup portion, just because we don't have the staff to do so. But on the outreach side and working with the individuals, that is new, and that's the pilot project that we're referencing.
Okay, and so my final question, because that's what I was trying to understand, if there was going to be a circuit that they were going to do as a regular schedule. And so I guess if there's some folks who might be rough living, I guess that's what we were calling, maybe living in a tent, these folks would be given then some alternatives or some assistance to find lodging, perhaps through this new program.
That's correct. That's the intent of the program. Exactly. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much for all of that. As you know, I'm getting calls about, as we've seen some folks migrating outdoors now. And so it's good to know that we have started this program and have a mechanism in place and some scheduling, and I'm really appreciative of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton, for that, and I appreciate the questions. Councillor Phillips, you got your hand up.
Mr. Mayor, Director Douglas gave us a good overview of the impact financially of where we are. And at the end, we're going to be $2.9 million in the hole. Recently, we were made aware of quite a few pieces of land that could be or have been declared surplus in the city. Director Douglas gave us some indications as how we might find some of that 2.9 million. Are we considering, or should there not be a push to try and get rid of some of this surplus land so we can recoup some of the loss also? Are we making an effort for that? I'll take that to our CAO, and she can direct it to whoever she needs to.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. I'll start with this one, because what we want to be cautious of is trying to find things like rushing the sale of lands to cover a deficit, when the provincial government should be trying to step up and close a lot of these gaps. I've sat on a number of phone calls with ministers at both the provincial and federal level now, and I can say confidently that municipalities across Ontario are making sure that they capture every loss that is attributable to COVID-19. And the direction that a lot of the mayors and CAOs are taking is, the last thing we want to do is try ourselves on this matter and let the province off of the hook on trying to address some of the structural issues that we're going to be facing when it comes to the end of our year. We can't put this on the backs of taxpayers, nor should we be rushing to make other decisions that would be counter to help the cities move forward in a stronger way. So while I appreciate the question, I'll turn it to the CAO. I can tell you from the mayor's perspectives across the province, and I think through AMO, is that we're expecting the province and maybe the federal government to step up and close a lot of our gaps in loss of revenue. To the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That pretty much covered, how we're thinking about this. We see in front of us a number of $2.9 million of potential revenue loss, understanding that it's potential at this point. These are estimates that we're making. We're trying to be as reasonably accurate as we can. It has a number of components. The mayor spoke to some of them. So a large component of it is our is our transit operations, which we feel the province and the federal government have been very strong in saying that provision of transit to essential workers who need to get to work, to those who of our vulnerable community who need that, needs to be maintained. From the side of our Transit Commission, they were very, very financially conscious as to contracting their services so that they were spending only the money they needed to provide that base level of service. Then we will be looking to the provincial and federal governments to help us in this situation. There's no guarantee that money will come. However, this is one of the areas that we certainly will be pushing very strong with all the other municipalities in Ontario. There's other components to that amount. There is, we have various reserves. We have some of the reason for the loss of revenue is many of the applications and things coming through the planning and building services. Building services, there is a reserve for these types of times. We don't like to use it for this, but should we need to, that is there for that. This is not a short-term situation, so we like to, it's good policy for us to look for longer-term solutions. So while certainly if something presents itself, we would look at all opportunities to fill in that revenue hole, if we want to call it that. But the solution will be one of balance, and it will be one where we will look at what that number is. So we're looking at, the Director of Financial Management Services had mentioned these. We're looking to make sure anything essential that's not essential for us to do just because it's in the budget, we may not be doing it to help there. To look for other areas for funding, to look to reserves, to look at a long-term financial plan. So certainly if opportunities do present themselves, it isn't something we would jump to right away, but we need to look at everything, and we will look at everything and work through this with council and the budget committee as time progresses.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I really hope that the province comes through with the money that we hope they will, but there's a lot of towns in the province who are probably in the same position as we are, and hopefully we'll get something, but we might not get all of it, and I think we have to be ready to supplement what we don't get. We certainly, I agree with the mayor that we can't put it on the back of the taxpayers at budget time. And as far as reserves are concerned, we've been told as councillors for years that we shouldn't be touching the reserves because they're for a rainy day. Well, this is not a rainy day, this is a thunderstorm. So we really have to look at where we can get that money from to supplement what the province will give us. And I think, again, the sale of surplus is perhaps the way to go. But anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Looking for any other hands that are up? Okay. Is that Councillor Cisco, your hand up? Okay. All right, so no further questions. I want to thank the CAO for the thorough report, and to Director Douglas for the financial update. I will say that there will be a further update at the Budget Committee meeting, and we'll have more information as the financial side of this picture becomes more clear. There is a motion on the floor, and the motion is that the City of St. Catharines continues to work to keep essential services running for our residents.
Yeah.
And
okay, no problem. Yeah, if you can forward me that, but we can
delete. Can you just mute all of everything?
Mute them.
Mute them all. Okay, thank you. That the City of St. Catharines continues to work to keep essential services running for residents and businesses during the rapidly evolving COVID-19 pandemic from a strategic and proactive approach, while also suffering plummeting revenues. And that organizations such as the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and the Large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario have urged upper levels of government to provide emergency operating funding to municipalities to maintain municipal service levels, and that the City of St. Catharines continues to endorse the advocacy work of the above organizations on behalf of municipalities to upper levels of government, and affirms the need for direct and flexible emergency relief for municipalities, and that the city continues to focus on recovery efforts while working with the above mentioned organizations as well as upper levels of government to address short-term, long-term financial impacts, recovery efforts, and economic stimulus. And further, that the City of St. Catharines forward the resolution to the Prime Minister of Canada, Canada's Minister of Finance, the Premier of Ontario, Ontario's Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Ontario's Minister of Finance, local area MPs and MPPs, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the Large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario forthwith. And this is moved by Councillor Dodge.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll move it.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. And I got questions. Councillor Garcia, you got your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a minor amendment to that motion, which I think would be friendly, and that is we're copying every politician everywhere, but should we not also copy that resolution to all the regional municipalities in Niagara and to regional government as well?
I will look to the Director of Economic Development because it looks very similar to the one that we approved at the region that threw it back down to the municipalities for. So I think it would be redundant if I can. I'll look to the Director of Economic Development.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it would appear to be redundant. However, we can forward a copy if that's what the councillor chooses.
Okay, so we'll forward a copy of this. Not for approval, just for their information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garcia.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions or comments, I'll look to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, do we have a seconder for this, please?
Seconded by
Bruce.
Councillor Williamson.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, again, thank you to staff for all the work that they're doing on this. We'll go to 3.2, which is the Director of Financial Management Services, Christine Douglas, to provide an overview on the 2020 report that was just issued by the region and sent to the municipalities. Director Douglas.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Outside of the managing the financial impact of COVID-19, city staff were continuing with our regular annual budget processes. And the 2020 tax policy was approved by Regional Council at its meeting on April the 23rd. And this is the final step in their 2020 budget process. With this approval, the city is now able to complete the final stage of our 2020 budget process. And this is the city's 2020 tax rate report. This confirms the 2020 tax rates used to calculate the tax levies to be collected to support not only the city, but the Niagara region and Niagara school boards. There's no authority for the city to change the regional or the education portion of the rates, and the city's tax rates are based on the 2020 operating budget approved by Council on December 16th, 2019, and the 2020 capital budget approved by Council on October 7th of 2019. The report in front of Council today is seeking Council's confirmation of the 2020 property tax rates as detailed in Appendix 1 of the report, in order for staff to finalize its 2020 budget process with the preparation of the final property tax bills and distribution to the residents of the city. The total impact of the median home, including the city, region, and educational portions, is $3,637.73, which is an increase of $141.61. Less than half of this increase, or $60.83, relates to the city portion. The remaining portion of $80.78 relates to the region of Niagara tax levy and waste management levy increases. It is important for these regular annual budget process items to continue to move forward, as the city has a responsibility to our citizens to continue to provide essential services that they rely on, as well as a responsibility for us to get to the other side of this and our local recovery efforts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Director Douglas, for that overview. Any questions on this report? Okay, I see no questions, and I need a mover to move the motion. Who wants to move it? Councillor Phillips, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kushner, thank you. Okay, I'll open the floor to the clerk to call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yeah.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris, are you here?
I am here. Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, so council's reconvened, and we're now moving on to motion to ratify recommendations forthwith. We have a motion that council adopt these items approved forthwith by general committee on Wednesday, May 6, 2020. Moving the motion to ratify forthwith recommendations, I have Councillor Harris. Are you there, Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Thank you. And seconding is Councillor Kushner. Okay, everyone in favor, show of hands. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, we have motions. The date of the next budget standing committee meeting, we have a motion that the budget standing committee meeting scheduled for Wednesday, May 20th, 2020 at 4:30 be rescheduled to Monday, May 25th, 2020 at 2:30 p.m. And this is a motion being made by Councillor Cisco.
So moved.
Seconding the motion is Councillor Littleton. Thank you. Any questions on this motion? I'll look to the clerk to call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yeah.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, next motion is date of next council meeting. We have a motion whereas COVID-19 outbreak and the provincial federal emergency declarations, many staff and councillors have been working from home. Therefore, be it resolved that the next meeting of council be rescheduled from Monday, May 25th at 6:30 p.m. to Wednesday, May 20th at 2:30 p.m. And be it further resolved that staff provide appropriate notice to the public and the media. Moving this motion, Councillor Dodge.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
And a seconded. Who would like to second this? Councillor Phillips, thank you. And any questions on this? Okay, I'll look to the clerk to call a question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, for that. We have a calls for notices of motion to be discussed at the May 20th meeting. 11.1, Councillor Cisco, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Providing a notice of motion for the next meeting, Councillor Porter and I will be bringing a motion with respect to the AODA and advocacy efforts for the AODA to the provincial government.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cisco. Any other notices of motion? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Council. We'll be going now into agency boards and committee reports. So I've got a couple of, and what I'm going to ask is if you have something in, I'm going to go through the ABCs. If you have something to say, simply I'll call you out. For transit, Councillor Miller, Councillor Dodge, do you have anything?
No, Mr. Mayor, not at this time. We actually are having a meeting on Friday, so we can have possibly some updates after that meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. For library, Councillor Littleton, Councillor Williamson.
Just a reminder to the public that they do not need necessarily have to have a library card to access our online resources right now, and we've really expanded the offering, so take advantage of it at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Littleton, anything?
No, thank you.
Okay. Airport, Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, as expected through this, we've seen a 91% drop in air traffic. We're hoping to continue to work with other airports, and we are in the middle of negotiating something with an airline. So from that standpoint, that's all I have for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. That would be expected during these times. Performing Arts Center, Councillor Garcia, I can imagine that's why you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. Re-emphasize again, you mentioned already in your report that we're welcoming the new executive director. She did start on Monday as planned, and she has already, I understand, held a town hall meeting with all staff, and she's getting right into it. At our last board meeting, we approved as a board extending the closure of the park through to June 30th with a potential opening July 6th, depending on how we can do that, you know, whether it's possible. The forecast net loss in revenue after savings is now up slightly to 241,000. And they are continuing the Niagara Performs series for local artists, live streaming. And now they're also looking at the ways to monetize this, since they do have to pay some artist fees. So, but at least that keeps us top of mind and connected for when we return to the full operation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. And for AMO, Councillor Dodge, do you have anything to add after any of the meetings you've been attending?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, I can give you a quick update. AMO has decided to now have a virtual conference rather than actually meet in Ottawa this year in August. And they feel it's very important for municipalities to still be able to get together and share some of the opportunities of information that we're learning throughout this emergency COVID-19. So that was one thing. And then recently, there was a letter sent to the Minister, Bill Moreau, the Minister of Finance, and the Honourable Rod Phillips, the Ontario Minister of Finance, and it was in regards to some of the stuff that you've already touched on, the municipal government services in Ontario and Canada economic recovery. It's an 8-page letter covering everything from municipal physical stabilization, economic recovery, flooding and stormwater management, accelerating existing infrastructure funding, the federal gas tax, connectivity, housing, childcare, and energy conversions, public and private buildings. And I can forward this letter to everyone. As I said, that it's quite lengthy, but very informative. And it was also CC to many people, and some of the people were in some of the motions that we put forward today. So that's just the report I have for today. Thank you.
Question? Councillor Phillips? No?
No, I don't have a question. I was just going to report on the symphony and Grape and Wine Festival.
Okay, I'm getting to you.
Okay.
Councillor Sorrento, you indicated there would be an email coming through Downtown Association.
I did, Mr. Mayor. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. The Niagara Wine Festival, if you want to put the symphony in there, why don't you combine the two, Councillor Phillips?
Sure. Thank you. I met with Dory Anderson this morning actually, and just briefly discussed what the Fall Festival is going to look like. There will be something happen, but it's going to look a lot different than it ever has before, given the situation that we're in. I'll be able to give you more of an update probably in a couple of weeks, I would hope. But there will be something going on as far as the Fall Festival of Grape and Wine. But as far as the parade is concerned and the day in the park, we're not. I guess to put it mildly, it's in jeopardy. As far as the symphony is concerned, I spoke with Brad DeKachuk, our very dynamic maestro, and he wants to meet very soon with our new economic director, executive director of the Performing Arts Center. He wants to plan a full season for next year, but he wants to talk with our executive director in order to put his ideas forward. And he's got some really, really good ideas as far as what he wants to do, but he has to obviously plan it with the executive director first. So hopefully we'll be able to have more information in that regards in the next month or so.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips, for that update. Greatly appreciated. Next on the list, I have Councillor Littleton. Do you want to provide an update on the folk arts? Anything going on folk arts? Traditionally, I'd be putting on a couple pounds right now. So that's why I look I actually look thinner than I usually do in any May, because I haven't hit any of the open houses yet. So.
Well, I think we're all getting a little COVID-15 or something. Remember that, like freshman 15 that everyone used to get? Anyway, folk arts, we had a meeting last week, but right now the festival has been postponed. And I think the hard date would be like August that had to be made if it would be canceled for the year. They've got a backup contingency plan, but for now, obviously, you're right, nothing is open. And so it is postponed at this point.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Littleton. I'm sure there's a lot of people thinking about folk arts and the festival and all the open houses that really define the month of May for a lot of people. So hopefully we'll see some information as well about how we can still celebrate the different cultures of our community. Even during the month of May, we can still celebrate by sampling some of the different foods that are being made available by the restaurants that are part of the ethnicity. I know Councillor Townsend has been featuring some of them on his Insta Live, and it's a good idea that if as councillors we can sort of point people in certain directions for different kind of ethnic foods in our community, that'd be great. Councillor Littleton, you have your hand up. I mean, Councillor Porter, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Am I on?
Yep.
Okay. I know that AMO is going in the direction of a virtual conference, and the registration is about $600 or $700 still, but there'll be some savings without hotel and food. And I'm wondering if it's possible, if staff could, or maybe the clerk's office can allow more of us to participate. I know that more than 6 can't go, but if we're participating virtually, could more of us potentially sign up? That's just my question. I don't know if you could have an answer to that right now, or maybe an email to us after the fact. I think some of us might be able to participate if it's online.
It's a great idea. I'll ask the CAO to follow up via email after reviewing the budget and to see how many can participate. I think that's actually a very workable idea. Good job. Thank you, Councillor Porter. Okay, am I missing any ABCs? I don't think so. So we'll move on. We are going to go in camera. And so I'm going to look to the clerk to read the reasons for going in camera. And then I'll do a bit of a public explanation, and then we're going to do our thing. Okay, so to the clerk.
We're going to have Evan step in for a moment to read those reasons for us. Go ahead, Evan.
Thanks, Shelley. I have two motions to go in camera. Number 1, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board regarding Port Dalhousie Harbor Lands, 59A Lakeport Road, Realty File number 18.004. And the second reason, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board regarding Riverview Boulevard, Realty File number 19.064. And the city clerk has just returned, so I will pass it over to the clerk now. She's going to read another disclaimer regarding moving to the in-camera section. If you want to take that away, Bonnie.
Thank you, Evan. By attending the in-camera session, each member of council acknowledges that their obligations under the Code of Conduct, including responsibilities related to the confidentiality of closed session materials and discussions, remains the same as if you are physically present at the meeting. This includes that members of council are not permitted to record the proceedings, and they must ensure that no other person can see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place here today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to the clerk and the council coordinator for providing this direction. I have a motion to move in camera for the reasons noted by the city clerk, and that's moved by Councillor Porter. I have a seconder, which is Councillor Cisco. So I'm going to do a record. So after we do the recorded vote, if everyone could just stay on for a brief minute, I'm going to explain to the public what we're going to do. So I'll look to the clerk to call a question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yeah.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried unanimously.
Okay, and so for the people who will be watching this or who are currently watching it, what will happen is, as part of our in-camera infrastructure, counselors are going to log off Zoom, and then they're going to log into another platform, and it's called Skype. In that platform, it'll be a secure environment for council and staff to have a discussion about the items that have been identified. After that discussion, we will then close the Skype platform and then come back on to Zoom to ratify any of the decisions that we're going to make. So this will be like a virtual walk into another room, have a in-camera discussion, and then come out and have a public vote. So that's the direction. This is best practice that other municipalities have adopted, and you've heard from the clerk for the disclaimer, and we'll be following all of the correct protocols as allowed under the expansion of the Municipal Act. So this is allowable as part of our functions and as our part of our deliberations and responsibilities as councillors. So with that now, councillors, does anyone have any questions before we do this?
And with you.
Seeing no questions, I will see you in Skype in about a minute and a half.
So we're leaving.
Leaving. Yeah, leave and go to Skype.
Leave and into Skype. Okay.
Okay, who we missing? Is Councillor Harris? We got Councillor Dodge. Got everybody on? Okay. I just want to make sure. Are we missing Evan? Are we missing anybody?
We're just doing a check of that right now, but we know we have quorum right now, but I'll just do a quick attendance right now.
So I think it's just Councillor Kushner who will be off this call because he declared a conflict on the last one. So we should have. Okay, we're good to go. Okay. Motions arising from in-camera session, financial management services, property management, property matter, acquisition and disposition, in-camera pursuant to bylaw 215-170 as amended by section B23 C, a proposed or pending acquisition, disposition of land by the municipality or local board, Port Dalhousie Harbor Lands, 59A Lakeport Road, Realty File 18004. And Councillor Sorrento will be moving this.
I'll move it, Mr. Mayor. So moved.
Seconded by Councillor Littleton, I believe. Okay, I'll call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner, you're not in the room. Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
No.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, thank you, councillors. 15.2, financial management services, property management, property matter, potential acquisition of land in camera pursuant to bylaw 215-170, as amended by section 23C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, Riverview Boulevard Realty File 19064. And moving the recommendation, I have Councillor Townsend and seconded by Councillor Harris. So I believe through the city clerk, there's a splitting of the motion.
That's correct.
Okay, if you could provide guidance on the first motion that'll be debated on or voted on.
I'll quickly read it. That the outstanding taxes, I'm sorry, that council approve the staff recommendation contained in report FMS 074-2020 regarding a potential acquisition of land, and that staff prepare a report for developing the property and reach out to the groups as discussed in camera, and that the city solicitor be directed to prepare the necessary documents and the bylaw. That's the first portion. And then we'll debate this one first, or we'll vote on this one first.
Okay. Call the
I'm not
question.
clear. I thought it was split between the taxes and the 50,000.
That will be the second one, Councillor Williamson.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
No problem. Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yeah.
Councillor Phillips.
After careful consideration, I'll say yes.
Councillor Miller.
I refuse to vote on it. I'm not going to dignify with that.
So are you abstaining? Because an abstention is a no vote.
Yeah, I'm abstaining.
Okay. Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, so the second one, provide guidance to the clerk.
The second one is basically that the outstanding taxes on the property on Riverview Boulevard 44 be written off.
Okay, I'll call the question.
Councillor Dodge.
No.
Councillor Garcia.
No.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Definitely no.
Councillor Phillips.
No.
Councillor Porter.
No.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
Lost.
And that lost on a tie.
With that, we go to the next one. Reading of bylaws. We have a motion that the bylaws listed on council agenda A to G be read a first time considered passed, and that they be signed and executed by the mayor and city clerk. So I have Councillor Williamson making this. Councillor Williamson,
So moved, Mr. Mayor. Muted myself.
seconded by Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Okay, and so all in favor, show of hands.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so look to the clerk. What else do we have to the clerk?
You just voted for the bylaws, correct?
Yeah.
With the hands, okay. Then I don't believe I have any more motions, no more roll call. Oh, just we
Mr.
need to
Mayor?
read the additional bylaws, I'm sorry.
What do we need?
Mayor,
Councillor Sorrento, can you wait for a minute?
yeah, I can. Just make sure that I'm heard, please, sir.
Councillor,
Please.
Okay, the additional bylaws, who has the motion? Evan? It's on the top of the last page, the reading of the additional bylaws.
okay, so we have that the additional bylaws be listed in the council agenda as additional bylaws A to B, read a first time, considered and passed. And so that's a bylaw to authorize a contract with DeMar Construction, one reading with respect to Admiral Road and Park Avenue storm sewers under project P17020, delegation bylaw number 2004-277 as amended, and a bylaw to authorize a conveyance of certain lands from Mark Jensen, one reading with respect to 44 Riverview Boulevard to be considered at general committee meeting. We already did it, May 6th, 2020, that they be signed and executed by the mayor and city clerk. Councillor Williamson, you'll be making this motion as well?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
And it's seconded by Councillor Garcia.
Okay.
Okay. And I'll look to the clerk. So can we just do a show of hands? All in favor, show of hands. Okay, all the hands are up. So we have just before adjournment, Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate that. And Mr. Mayor, I will look for guidance from the clerk and or the solicitor and or you, sir, without going into great detail, because I know that this is being recorded and I just don't want to say the word that was stated when we were in camera. I was having some difficulty with my computer, which happens, and we all make mistakes, Mr. Mayor. And while that was taking place, while all the microphones were turned on in front of council and my colleagues, there was a word that was said. Now, I'm going to look to the clerk because I know people heard it and I heard it. So I'm going to look to the clerk.
I didn't hear it.
I'm going to ask Mr. Mayor through you to the clerk for direction so I don't kind of air our dirty laundry in public at this time. And I really am showing a tremendous amount of restraint and respect, Mr. Mayor. So please, clerk, can you advise me as how to proceed with this? Because I've got a pretty good idea as to what I think I'm going to do in about 2 minutes when I email everybody.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Sorrento, you can ask that there be a public apology. You can formalize your complaint if you feel
well,
that's.
So
you can ask for an apology.
Well, is this the appropriate forum and the appropriate time, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk?
It is. I just don't know if the individual's in the room.
Well.
Okay, so let's take this offline because I didn't hear. I was trying to understand things, so I don't.
So let's take it offline. I'm good.
Yeah, so let's just
because I heard.
We'll work with the clerk on this and see what happened. I'd rather do that than try to sort of push something through right now. So if we could just go that offline, Councillor Sorrento.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, just a quick one. Councillor Sorrento, please just contact me and we could also do it at the next council meeting. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the direction and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? I guess Councillor Miller.
Yeah. Motion from me, seconded by Lori, the little legend that could Littleton, that this meeting be adjourned.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That is adjourned. Thank you very much. Take
Be
care,
well.
everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.